What's up, FITHEADS? Max Millsleeves here. Today we have an awesome new episode of the podcast. We have Kiki Smith, who is the trainer's trainer. She talks a lot about the mental approach to getting physical results. She talks a lot about decision fatigue and my personal favorite, how to develop an identity, and specifically an athletic identity. Really cool episode. I'm psyched for you guys to check it out. Abs.
Welcome to Total FitHeads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Today we have Kiki Smith. Welcome, Kiki. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you are known as the trainer's trainer, and we would love to hear about what that is and how you got that name.
I am. So the trainer's trainer it started actually accidentally, only because I was a trainer, and then as I started building my online business, I started getting a little bit more of, the behind the scenes, other trainers reaching out to me like, hey, I see you either talking about lifting or eating more and all those things, or just asking questions about how to build their own online business, or just the people that were following me that were, they would get so enthusiastic about the changes that they were making that then they wanted to become trainers. So I ended up starting a team of trainers online, which then led to local gyms reaching out and asking me to come and talk to their trainers, which then led to like different metabolic clinics and local schools that run like DEXA scans and stuff like that, asking me to come and talk to them. So yeah, it was just a nickname, the trainer's trainer, because of the fact that I train other it's pretty cut and dry. But yeah, I basically train other trainers. And I love that actually so much more, because I feel like you have a much bigger reach when you're training the people that are training the people.
Top of the pyramid.
Yeah,
Reaching more people.
I love it.
Cool. Well, I also saw listed that the Board of Behavioral Sciences and Society for Neuroscience. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I love, and that actually started from clients because, and I'm sure you guys know this, like the mindset side is so big. Like you can't really separate, the physiology, the psychology, like they all go hand in hand. So you could give people just like these blanket set of rules and everybody can walk away and get a different result from them, based on their mentality, like where they stand on stuff mentally, if they're already stressing about stuff, the cortisol, all that stuff. So just seeing that in the trenches with my own clients, how some of them would take information and run with it, and others would take information and seem like they were doing it but not really get the same results. I started diving more into the psychology about it just to try to help them to change their behavior. So it started off as more a behavior psychology thing to help them create healthy habits and stuff like that. But as I dug deeper, I just realized that was where it all started. So I really started switching what I was teaching and talking more about the diet mentality side, and how when we're stuck in this, like we were talking before we hopped on, about how ladies are scared to lift, for instance, and
yeah, I don't want delts, sweat, growth.
And
if I touch a barbell, I'm going to turn into the Hulk.
Yeah. Right? Like that one time I lifted, I got so bulky, and it's like, and just realizing how much that got in their way, because if you think that, then guess what's going to happen? Every time you get some like water retention or whatever, then that mindset like trickles right back in, and you're like, see, I knew it. I was getting bulky. You lied to me. And then, they go all the way down the rabbit hole again. So just really interesting seeing how the science and how the brain really runs the show, because we think that we can just follow a plan. And people get plans all the time, but yet people are having more and more struggles trying to actually execute on the plans. And it's only because we've been taught things one way for so long, and our mind is kind of set in that path. So for me, that was the most interesting part. And I love the psychology that I really went down that rabbit hole, and then ended up creating a whole like product behind it and everything, just really helping women to understand first just the psychology. And we could spend months going through that, and then once their mind is on board, their body follows, versus the other way around. A lot of people just try to beat it into the ground, and if their mind isn't on board, like if you're lifting weights every day just because somebody told you to, but in your head you think, I need cardio in order for me to see results, you're not going to see results. And so many women were experiencing that. So for me, that was really what started the psychology part of it.
So you're saying it's less about getting people to commit and more about making them recognize that what they're doing is going to be effective?
Yes, because you can do something just because someone told you to. But if you 100% believe it won't work for you, it won't work for you. And so getting people to understand first, like, what are all your beliefs around this thing before you actually begin to execute on it, gives them a completely different result. Because there are people, like I've had the clients that will go through every single workout, they'll log the food, they'll do all the things, and they will not see the results. But in their head, if they're looking at the macros that I assign them and they're thinking, I need to eat less carbs than what you assigned me, or they're thinking, I need more cardio than you've put in my workout, like whatever it is, they're either thinking that and or accidentally sabotaging themselves because they're going to go and do the things, you know, so I'm going to give them a macronutrient ratio and they're going to go and do something completely different. They're going to give themselves less carbs and they're going to have less energy in the gym. They're going to be able to execute, you know, they're not going to be able to execute as much in the gym and have the energy that they could to power through that workout. So they're not going to get the results from that workout. And then they're going to do more cardio because they're going to be like, I'm not getting results from the lifting. So it's like, it all starts with that mindset and the way that we look at, or the interpretation that we have on what has given us results in the past. And for most people, that's what it's based on. It's based on wherever that first diet was, or whatever the first thing that they did, they got them results. Because most of the women that I work with, like, they're in their 40s, 50s, and they're still trying to do things that they did when they were like 15, 20 years old that like got the weight off. And it's because they're so stuck there because they got the results that one time, and that's the connection that their brain made, and that's like the road that they travel from then on. Even if they spin their wheels for 20 years, you can sit down with them and they're still like, I don't know, but for me, this is what I need to do. For me, I can pop in this DVD program and it's what always works. And it's like they'll throw the always in there, even though it's not like it's obviously not working. That's why you're here. But we don't look at things like that. We just make these connections and then like stay there.
So what do you find is more effective, like convincing people to focus on the right thing or allowing them to do what they think is correct? You see what I'm saying? Like, does believing something make it correct, or do you have to change a mindset to something that actually helps their body and their state of life?
It's actually a little bit of both, because if somebody is, you know, and so this is what I teach a lot of my trainers. If someone is 100% convinced that a certain way works for them, then you have to meet them where they are, because that is like, you're just going to fight them. So either they're going to be the person that like pays you for 4 weeks and never comes back, or gets a session from you and you know what I mean, because they're not satisfied with the results, or they're going to do it and then just be frustrated and be like, see, I told you that this isn't working. So you do have to meet them where they are. If they believe. I
told you. I didn't do what you said, and it didn't work. I told you.
I told you. It doesn't. Nothing ever works for me. You know. So like it's really about finding that belief first. Like, you have to find what their core belief is that has kept them from getting results for the last decade or two. Because if they haven't gotten results, like, there's something that's there. They've done all the things. They've done all the programs. They've, you know, gone on whatever, Weight Watchers or whatever 100 times, and they'll keep saying that it works. So first we meet them there, and then we start breaking down, well, why do you think that it works for you? You know, and really helping them to uncover, like, okay, so if it works, then what happened between the last time that you did it and now? Like, why didn't it work permanently? And really helping them to see the difference between something that works temporarily and something that works forever, and helping them to see that temporary changes are giving you the temporary results. If you're changing something that you can't do forever, then you're always going to go back to the way that you were. So it's just helping them to make that connection. But a lot of times you do have to start them where they are. So, you know, where the woman that is 100% against lifting, you have to start her with, you know, sandbags or kettlebells or something that like seems like fun but is still adding resistance.
Grocery bags, heavy grocery. Could just go grocery shopping a lot.
Exactly. So it's really it's breaking that part down for them and helping them to see that, you know, why, like the why behind it all.
that it's tied to, you're seeing it's tied to their initial success with something versus I would just want to blame the stupid industry for like feeding lies to people. It really is about that they did something that worked and then they're stuck on it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, and I mean, it happens to us all the time. Like, something happens when we're young, we make an interpretation about it, and then we're that way forever. Like, I'm not an athlete or whatever it is. So you just, like, have this interpretation, and then they run with it. And then they're still dealing with that. So you'll have the person that was, like, the shy kid that was never picked in school or whatever, and then they're like, yeah, I can't do these exercises because I'm not athletic. So it could be a belief like that, or it could be the belief that, you know, like, I'm not supposed to eat that much, maybe because their mom told them that when they were younger. So you have the women that when they were growing up, their mother was always regulating everything that they ate. And even if the rest of the family could eat these things, because they were the bigger girl, their mom would put regulations on them. Like, no, you don't need a dessert, or you don't need a second helping. And so for them, when they come across, if I'm saying you're not eating enough to fuel your workouts, they're like, well, I don't have that problem. I'm not supposed to eat that much. And they just continue thinking that, even if they never lost weight from it. It's just the belief that stemmed from them. But most of the time, it comes from that very first thing. A person that's, you know, even the research shows that Weight Watchers, like, people come back to it like 20 times. Because once it works for them, like, it keeps working.
Yeah.
Well, this mentality thing also reminds me of the study that blew my mind, and I think about it all the time. There was this Harvard psychologist that took these maids in hotels and, you know, asked them, how active are you? And they're all like, I'm sedentary, I don't work out. And then, like, they told half of them, oh, actually, you're vacuuming, you're pushing a cart,
Yes.
you're making beds. Like, this, you're hitting way above the minimum requirement for working out every day. You're actually working out. And they didn't change anything else. They just told them they're working out. No, I mean, like, even the maids said, like, yeah, nothing else changed, but they checked back, you know, a couple of months later, and they lost weight, lost fat, their blood pressure came down, their waists were thinner, and the other half that never were told that they were working out, just nothing happened. So just thinking that you're working out but doing the exact same thing made a difference in their bodies, which, like, blows my mind.
It's all connected, and it's crazy how much of it just stems from your thoughts about the thing. Because just like you said, like, if they don't think, like people that don't think they exercise, or I'm not an exerciser, like, once you form an identity around something, it's crazy how much that affects your life. So if you're the big girl, if you're not someone who exercises, if you, like, I can't stand lifting, it's boring to me, or whatever this is, once you create an identity around something, like, your brain does everything in its power to protect that identity. And that's where it gets harder when you start wanting to make changes that are outside of your identity. If you want to be this super lean person, but I've always been the big girl, or I've always had a harder time losing fat, or I've never been able to get ripped, or whatever it is. Like, if you have these beliefs around it, but you actually want the thing that's outside of it, like, that's brain-based. So you have to actually fight against your own psychology to get that thing, because it's outside. It's like me, which, I mean, I know we're on video on a podcast, but I'm black. That's like me saying, like, I want something, like, I can't do that, I'm black. And then not being able to do it, or then not going after it at all, right. Instead of finding out, like, okay, so what are the ways that I can do this thing because I'm black, or I'm a woman, or I'm short, or I'm tall. And so once we have an identity that we think keeps us in a box, we keep ourselves in the box, proving that it's because of the identity instead of finding out.
What's the best way? How do you change it once you decide, like, you go from, like, oh, I've never lifted, I've never done anything. How do you change that identity to, I'm an athlete, I work out? How do you make that change? How do you make that shift, I guess?
So with my clients, what I have them do is first, like, when we find what their identity is now versus the identity that they want to become, we start breaking that down and discussing, like, okay, so what would that identity look like? Like, what are all these ways that you're detached from this identity that you think that you want? So for instance, an athlete, because I do have a lot of women that come to me and they're like, I just want to lift and look like an athlete, but then they don't believe that they're athletic. So we say, like, okay, well, what would it look like?
I want to look like an athlete. I don't want to be an athlete.
Yeah, like in order to do that, like, what does an athlete do? because they don't know, you know, but they're like, I just want to look athletic. I'm just not an athletic type of person. And it's completely an oxymoron. So we start talking about, okay, well, what does an athlete do? And then how does this differ? So someone may say, okay, I want to look athletic or I want to be athletic, but in the past when something has gone wrong for me or when a diet plan or something wasn't working for me, I quit. And so we discuss, okay, what does an athlete do if they fail at something? They keep going. Even if I have to have them watch, like I'll assign them to go home and watch like movies that are based on athletes because sometimes they literally don't know. They're like, I don't get it. I don't know what an athlete thinks because I'm not one. So I'm like, okay, go watch some movies about athletes and then let's come back and talk about it.
So who do you prescribe? What athlete do you prescribe to people?
Premium Rush.
Kobe. Is it Kobe? It's Kobe. No.
Oh my gosh. Of course it's Kobe. Of course. You know. And sometimes even that is like a hard assignment for them. They're like, I don't watch athletic movies. I'm like, okay, you have to start seeing who these people are. So like, of course, like I'm a basketball person. So yes, a lot of my suggestions are usually basketball related, Michael Jordan, Kobe, you know, but I try to get them to start like where they are. Because again, if we're talking about women and they have some identity around the types of movies that they watch.
Bend it like Beckham.
Exactly. Like I'll be like, is there a rom-com that has an athlete in it? Like whatever it takes. Let's start there so that we can see the ups and downs that they go through. Because even when they hit a brick wall, they'll like come back from it. If they get injured, they come back from it, which a lot of women may not. If they don't understand the athletic mindset, if they lift weights and they get injured, that may confirm their, see, this is why I shouldn't be lifting weights thing. Whereas that's usually when I'll come back and say, athletes typically get injured while doing their sport. Like, that's when the athletic injuries occur. So you're an athlete, athletes get injured. It's okay. Like, what do we have to do to get you back on the field? What do we have to do to get you back on the court? And you just start looking at it from that different perspective of, if I'm an athlete and I got injured, do you quit the entire sport? No. You go to the physical therapist, you get, you know, whatever. You do what it takes to get yourself back on the field.
Because you're an athlete, your identity is tied to that. That's so smart.
Yeah. And the average recreational exerciser isn't, so they may interpret that completely different than an athlete does.
Okay, this makes me feel better about like my only personality really is deadlifting, but like you have to be that. Wait, well, it also makes me think that I can just decide that I'm the leanest I've ever been, and I'm just gonna sit on this couch, and like if I convince my brain that, like my body will follow. Okay.
But that's it. If you're the leanest that you've ever been, like what actions would the leanest you be taking? Then you would take those actions. You see what I'm saying?
Sitting on this couch, dang it. All right. Well, we also want to talk to you about macros. We would love to hear, well, first of all, like just the basis of sort of getting into this. I've been tracking my macros for a couple of years now, but we know that some of our listeners are kind of getting into it, have heard about it, and would love to hear your take on it.
Okay. Well, so depending on where you are starting, I'm assuming most people are probably using something like MyFitnessPal or something like that, right? And whatever MyFitnessPal gives you is 100% wrong. So let's just start there.
Oh, that's why I didn't want to start for the longest time, because so basically you want to track your fat, protein, and carbs. And I swear that everything in there is kind of garbage, or it's really hard to get it dead on. But then again, does it need to be?
Yeah, so like whatever the minimum requirements is that MyFitnessPal gives to most people is ridiculous.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you mean specifically what they're telling people to their intake should be?
Yeah. So, like, once you log in, because I have a lot of people that are like, I'm crushing my protein, you know, and MyFitnessPal is giving them, like, whatever, 15 or 20% protein, which is not, that's a non-thing. Like, that's not going to be enough for an athletic person, for someone
who's the FDA says
lose.
It's fine.
For the sedentary person that's, like, laying around in a comatose state, that's wonderful. That's plenty for them. So yeah, so I would like start there, and then it's really based on your goals. So that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize either, because a lot of people just kind of want a blanket amount of calories, macros, whatever, you know what I mean? So everybody wants like a 1,200 calorie diet, and they want to have like a specific, whatever, 40, 30, 30 split of your macros or whatever it is, which is going to be different for everybody. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the way that you eat has to be based on your goals, your body type, but also your food preferences, you know, and a lot of people don't consider that. So you may have someone that lowers their carbs really, really extreme, but carb is their preference. And when it comes to your macros, like if you have to maneuver things, your carbs and your fat are where the maneuvering happens. Like those can kind of be more preference based. So a lot of times we're looking for this like be all end all. Do I go low carb, high fat, low fat? And those can be based on your food preference. So if you tend to have more of that mouthfeel of like, I want fattier foods, I like a creamier based dressing, I like chicken legs versus chicken breasts, I like, you know, fattier cuts of steak, whatever it is, if you lean more towards the fat category, then that means that your reductions in calories, if you're trying to lose fat, probably should come from carbs. If you're the opposite and you're like, I'm a carb queen, like I want all the carbs that there are, so so I'm going to go a little bit leaner on the fat. So I'm going to have the leaner cuts of meat, the lower fat, you know, whatever, milks and dairy and stuff like that, because I want more space for my carbs. Whereas like your protein and your fiber, which fiber's a micro, not a macro, but it's still like those are your non-negotiables. Yeah. So you want to build everything out from around there if it's something that's going to be like super sustainable for you versus all the way to one end or the other.
So yeah. How important is it sticking, do you think it is to stick to, okay, I've decided that I'm heavy on carbs and I'm going to do that and bring my fat down a bit, always going to keep the protein up. What about the next day? I'm like, ooh, actually, I want an avocado and I'll have less popcorn or whatever. And then the next day you're back up to carbs again. Well, how important is it to stay consistent once you pick what your preference is?
Honestly, like I said, if your protein's consistent and it's within your calorie range, it's not as important. The only reason that it's important is if you decide, like, I want to have a high fat day, and that takes your calories like 300, 500, 800, calories more than usual. So it's because a lot of times there's this debate over like which one's more important, the calories or the macro. Well, they're both important because macros have calories. So your macros are adding up to a certain amount of calories. So the important thing is that like your calories is what determines whether you gain or lose muscle or fat. And your macros determine what type of, like if you're losing muscle or fat. So if you're just dropping your calories, which is what what most people consider dieting, that have been doing it forever, that's when they lose weight, but not necessarily fat. Watching your macros is what helps you to really dial it in and make sure that you're losing fat as much as possible. Like a little bit of muscle loss is probably inevitable, but you want to like minimize that as much as possible. And that's the reason why like the protein intake is so important. So yeah, you could maneuver them both day to day, like if you have a different mouthfeel every day, but you wouldn't want to go over your calories and you wouldn't want to take anything from your protein or your fiber while doing that. So it's kind of like that's the gray area for that. So you want to be able to nail both the calories and the macros within that. But for ease and psychological purposes, it's probably easier to pick one or the other, because when you're in a deficit, like that's already like starting the decision fatigue spiral, and your decision fatigue plays a lot into your like being able to stick with the diet. So if you're making 100 choices a day, every day, then your capacity to be able to stick to it is going to be lessened each day. So even though you can have a lot of variety, like try to pre-plan things when you can so that you're not making a ton of decisions, especially if you're like stressed out, which I mean, right now, aren't most people stressed out? Like it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you're a fan of meal prep then.
Sometimes, but not like, I'm not really stringent on meal prep. I'm just like, if you're making one thing, make 2 or 3. Like, that's the way that I look at it. Is like, if you're making dinner, then make enough to have for lunch. It doesn't have to be, I mean, unless you have the time or space. But because of the fact that I train a lot of moms and they don't always have the time for that. So for me, it's more like just do double of whatever you're doing. Like when you're making a meal, it's a lot easier to just make double to triple that recipe than it may be for them to reserve a whole Sunday to, chop, cook, prep, everything. So either split it up over a few days, you know what I mean? Like do your grocery shopping. All of this stuff is like weird to even talk about right now because everything's so different.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't want to be like, go to the grocery store and get all these things. Like, I don't even know what's at your grocery store if you're ordering groceries. I don't know how that works now. But if you do it in phases, that's going to be a lot easier. Meal prepping does make it, like, it's really based on your lifestyle. If you have a super stressful lifestyle and you want to lose fat, you have to make the fat loss part like as brainless as possible so that you can
Same breakfast.
Doing it. Yeah. Like, and that's...
Allie eats the same breakfast every day and has for a year, 5 years?
6 years.
5, 6 years.
Really?
It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
It's not bizarre.
I mean, it's
the
cool,
bizarre
sorry.
part is that I take a photo of it and put it on Instagram in its
Every
own
day?
same photo every day. Yeah. It's
Okay,
stupid.
I have to know, what is the breakfast?
2 pieces of chicken breast, a half a cup of beans, a pepper, like a bell pepper, eat it like an apple, and a tomato eaten from my hand like an apple.
Wow.
There's salt on the chicken.
First of all, delicious.
That's what I'm thinking, Max. I'm like, yum, I guess.
For
Hot
5
sauce,
years,
all right.
I still wake up and go, oh, dope, I get to eat the same breakfast.
Oh my gosh, I
I
can't.
can't claim to
can't
be
imagine that.
normal, though.
Decision fatigue. That I really like that term. I mean, I'm assuming that's a real term.
Yeah,
decision
yeah.
fatigue.
Yeah.
You didn't just make it up on the spot like a genius. But
I mean, I can take credit for it.
take all the credit because I never heard of it before. A lot of people have trouble with, I don't want to eat the same thing. It's so boring.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get somebody to try to, try that? Do you know what I mean? Or like, how do you convince someone to say, "Oh, I don't want to eat that. That's boring." I feel like a lot of people run into that as their problem with, I don't want to meal prep, I don't want to eat super clean, I don't want blah, blah, blah. What is your approach to that?
So first, it is helping them to understand that decision fatigue is a real thing. And so, like, first, let's break down how many decisions that you're making in a day. If you're not making a ton, then sure, have tons of variety, live on MyFitnessPal, figuring out how to make it all work. Like, that's fine if you have the time. But if you don't have the time and you're making decisions about every single thing, like, somewhere you're going to have to do something that's kind of repetitive. It's like how, like, you guys have heard, like, how Steve Jobs, like, wore the same thing every day or whatever. Like, that's really, like, that was a big part of him reducing decision fatigue for him. Is like, I'm not going to waste, if I only have so many decisions per day, I'm not going to waste one on figuring out what I'm wearing today. So he just wore the same
So
thing
Allie
every
is
day.
the Steve Jobs of breakfast. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, she is. She
Booyah.
has taken the thought out of it because, I mean, that's a really high protein breakfast, Allie. Like, you know how many people are wondering, like, how will I get in that much protein for breakfast? You probably get in more for breakfast than other people are getting in all day.
You just blend chicken breast into a shake. Max used to do that.
I used to do that too. It's disgusting.
Oh
Now that
my
we're all breakfast shaming each other, I guess. Yeah, it was gross.
Crazy. Okay, then I would
Very
definitely get
short
breakfast
period.
shamed because I'm like a carb queen for breakfast.
You open with carbs.
Oh my gosh, I love carbs. I do it less now, but that's because of same thing, like decision fatigue. Like I have specific things that I grab, but that's my intrinsic. My intrinsic is like I want to get up and have freaking like French toast and like the whole shebang, and like only eat bacon or eggs like if I have to. Like I really prefer to just eat the carbs. Like, that's all I want. I want all the syrup. I want all the bread. I want all the stuff. So for me, developing a protein habit was one of those where I had to allow it to get boring, and do the thing because it's about what you want. If you don't want the results of it, then it's fine. You can completely dismiss the fact that you have to eat whatever your macros are, your 150, 175, 225 grams of protein or whatever it is for you. Like you can dismiss that if you don't actually want the results of that thing. But if you want the results of the thing, then you have to figure out where to limit the decision fatigue. So if you don't want to do it in your food, then where else can you do it at? Can you do it with your clothing? Can you do it with your, whatever, wear the same hairstyle every day, have someone else map out your meals for you, but order something that has a variety, or have your pick the meal that you want the variety at, or plan the variety. Like, you can still have the variety if you plan it in advance, but a lot of people use that as an excuse, like you were talking about, Max, like to just eat different stuff all day, every day. And then they punch everything in at the end of the day and they're like, I don't understand why nothing never works out on, my macros never just magically fall together. And
must be a problem with the app, probably.
Exactly. So you have to, like, you can have variety. It's just going to take a lot more to say. Like, my husband is like that. Like, I can eat the same thing every day. And he's like, I want to be shredded, but I don't ever want to eat the same thing twice. And I'm like, good luck. And let me know how it works out for you. And sometimes his macros are amazing, and sometimes they're like shot, but it's based on if he sits down and like really like mad scientist micromanage, like, I'm gonna fit in this beer and then I'm gonna do this, and he'll make it all work. Mm-hmm. But if he's only doing that once or twice a month, then the results won't be there, and that's the thing, is that you can do it, but are you willing to do that every day? So sit down, map it out, and see what it actually looks like to hit your macros and have that variety. Try doing it for a full week. And if you can't, then maybe it's time to consider something different.
Eat the same thing. That's honestly why I do it. I've read that it's 35,000 decisions a day on average that an adult makes. So I only make 34,999.
Exactly. Allie's got the edge, you guys. Because of her breakfast. So yeah, it's about planning. You can have all the variety that you want if you're willing to plan it. So maybe if you have specific days where you're making less decisions, use those days to plan. Don't try to do it in the heat of the moment on a super busy day where you're like homeschooling 4 kids, doing 3 Zoom calls for your business, and trying to figure out how to get toilet paper. Like, it's too much. You're gonna be better off just eating whatever you ate the last time the macros worked out for you. Like, not saying it has to be boring, but just, you have to look at your life. That's where the mindset comes in. That's where the psychology comes in, because we don't understand that the willpower is a limited resource. When you pull it from one area, you don't have it for another area. So when you're out, you're out. So it doesn't matter if you spend your whole day like, holding back, biting your tongue because your boss is driving you crazy, and like stuck in traffic back when traffic was a thing, and, going to the grocery store and somebody would cut in front of you in line. Like, if you're having all these things happen to you and you're trying to like restrict things all day long in your diet, that's when you get home at the end of the night and you're like eating the tile off the floor because you can't make any more decisions. Like, everything is just like, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. This is going to go in my mouth. And then you end up binging because you've made all your decisions and now you just can't think straight. So it's really about honoring and respecting that. If you don't believe that's a real thing, then you're going to continue going down that same path of trying it, being as perfect as you can for a limited period of time, and then throwing all caution to the wind and binging.
So
and you end up...
what you're saying is you should phone it in at work so you can focus on your diet.
Exactly. I mean, you gotta phone it in somewhere.
You have to literally phone it in right now.
Yeah.
So you gotta
phone
realize.
it in.
Yes, exactly.
How much do you take your workouts into account when setting up your diet plan? Especially now, because I know a lot of people, their workouts are changing. Mm-hmm. So maybe they've figured out a good diet plan that works for them, but now their workout structure is going to drastically change because they can't go to the gym anymore. They're doing body weight, or they're doing home workouts. They're picking up rocks or whatever. I don't know what people are doing now. So how much, when you change your workout, how much do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I periodize all of it. So I periodize the way that I eat. I periodize the way that I work out. And combine the two of them so that they work together. So typically, like, if I'm in a period of muscle growth, then I would make sure that I eat more. If I'm in a period of trying to lose fat, then I would make sure I'm, cutting down a little bit. And when I'm being random, then I also make sure that like I'm at maintenance or slightly below, because my maintenance might be different than what it was before. And so like right now, what a lot of people are experiencing is what people that work from home have experienced across the board for like the last few years anyways, is you're a lot more sedentary when you're working from home. You're sitting at the computer all day. Like I know me, like I was already on Zoom calls every day. So like I know that it's harder for a lot of people, but that was one of the first things that I noticed was your NEAT goes down. So I'm sure people that like wear Fitbits, Apple Watches, whatever, are noticing that like your step count is probably way lower. You're walking your dog 37 times a day. You know, like you're trying to do what you can, but like you said, Max, the intensity isn't necessarily the same. So I'm a huge proponent for eating more, but I will be the first to say that like in this new era, people probably need a little bit less than they did before. Like if they're eating the exact same amount as they were when they were ripping and running a month or two ago, they may actually gain weight, you know, and not like wanting to put like more fear out there of like, and now you're going to gain weight on top of everything else. But, you know, it is something that we have to be concerned about, because the afterburn that we're getting from those of us that were like in the gym and lifting weights and stuff like that, we're not getting that anymore, you know, and like, we're not like with cardio, what you see is what you get. So maybe you decided that you're going to start running because you are home now. You don't have any equipment and you're like, well, I'm going to stay active. Let me go for some runs. You know, you're in a limited window before your body starts adapting even to those runs. Because at first it's going to give you a certain amount of burn, but as your body gets more efficient, as it does with endurance, you're going to do the same amount of work and burn less, you know, and that's going to keep happening. So unless you're making the adjustment somewhere, running farther, adding in some sprints, doing something to make it a little bit more metabolic, like we're all going to see some physique changes that might not be, you know, what we want right now, you know, but those that have been working to build muscle, the best thing about that is that like it takes a lot less energy to like keep the muscle, like once you really, really have it, than it does to build it. So those who were avoiding building muscle.
Oh, that makes me feel so much better. I needed to hear that. I needed that in my brain.
So you guys are probably good. If anyone who wasn't focusing on building muscle before, like it's going to be a little bit tougher because you don't have that muscle to hold you in there. And it's a lot harder to build it because there's just not enough progressive overload in a lot of the workouts that most of us are doing right now. I say most of us. I am doing progressive overload workout, but I'm just trying to be one of the people.
What would you prescribe to someone who's now locked out of their gym and wants to do, or like hasn't done a whole
you have to figure out
or whatever.
Like if there's progressive overload is really the key. So whatever that looks like for us, like, so the thing is that like, if you're used to lifting heavy and you know, like, okay, lifting heavy is what's going to get me my muscles, and maybe you're used to being kind of in that, like anywhere from like 5 to 12 rep range. If you're lifting weights where you can do whatever, 30, 40 reps, like I don't even know what people are doing, like 100 squats a day or something type stuff. You have to, like you have to still exhaust that muscle and you have to get really creative in doing it. So the thing is that you can still build muscle with high reps. It just takes a lot more reps to do it. So you have to be willing to do the reps, even though it's not as fun, or you have to figure out ways to add resistance to a movement. You just have to change some portion of it. So figuring out, am I changing the rep range? Am I changing the total volume that I'm doing? Am I changing the amount of sets that I'm doing? Am I reducing my rest periods? All of those things will help you to continue to get results as long as you're being very strategic about them. So that's the way that I set up workouts, like even for clients now that are doing body weight stuff. Like I'll have them, like if we start off with maybe doing 2 sets of something, then 1 week the sets will change to 3. The next week, if we were doing 15 reps, now we're doing 20. The next week, if maybe we had a 60-second rest, now we're cutting it down to 30. So you're having to change something each week to keep the progression going. And if you can get your hands on some weights and stuff, like I still highly recommend that. Like a lot of my clients and stuff, I had to let them know, like do what you can for the first like 2 to 3 weeks, but those physique adaptations can start happening in as little as 3 weeks. So while it's okay to kind of be random the first 3 weeks, you want to have that plan B. And if you don't have that plan B, the randomness is kind of what gets us, because of the fact that if we're doing 10 push-ups when we could actually do 30, then we're going to start seeing diminishing returns on those results. So it's really about figuring out the way, like, what can you do? If all you can do is push-ups and squats, like, A, I would see if you could find a way to do pull-ups somewhere too, so at least you have full body. But B, how can you start to progress those? If you're doing squats and you're doing 100, can you switch to one leg squats? Can you switch to, you know, like something else to overload that muscle in a new way? If you're doing push-ups, can you change them? Incline, decline, lift one leg up, lift both legs up, do, you know, more, do a one-arm push-up, do handstand push-ups. Like, what can you do to keep the progression going, to just keep changing how you're executing on that move, so that the amount of reps that you do doesn't change. Like, if you can find a way to challenge yourself at 15 reps and keep changing up the move so that you're always fatigued by 15 reps, that's going to be really powerful. Like, then you're going to know that you're doing something with that workout.
And we should mention that you have an app that's helping figure that out too, right?
I do. That I had to scramble to try to put some new workouts together. I had all these amazing gym workouts that were just
right,
ready to throw out there right now. Yeah, and a lot had to change in order to help my clients that were like struck. They're like, what what even happens now? So yes, I do.
All right. Well, where can we find that?
eatmoretorweighless.com/vault. And it's a workout vault, basically. That's why I call it the vault. My team took all of the workouts that we're releasing monthly in our app, because it's a periodization. We're just a new workout releases every 4 weeks that builds on the phase before it. And once the pandemic hit, they took all of the workouts and threw them inside of the vault so that people could be able to kind of pick and choose based on what equipment they have, but also anyone who actually does have the equipment can just do them right in order. So it gives more options, because that's what we all need right now is flexibility and options, whereas my actual app wasn't as flexible, because that was on purpose. I wanted people following something specific every single week.
You have mentioned that, like, maybe we are bringing the calories down because we're being less active during this time, which is a longer period of time. What about from day to day? Like, say I do get out and run a bunch and do some pull-ups on my door gym, versus the next day I'm just sitting on a Zoom the entire day. Do you change from day to day, or is it more you're about staying consistent that'll sort of balance out each day as you go along?
Yeah, I'm usually about staying consistent only because of decision fatigue. So I just kind of figure out what that average is, go below, above, or at it based on whatever my goals are, and just kind of stay there. And if I notice that things are changing, then I'll go back and check and see, like, okay, maybe I wasn't as active as I thought I was, you know, reduce another 50 to 100 calories per day and stay there. So I know, like, a lot of people do. But again, like, I'm just all about less decisions. So if I move a ton today and then none tomorrow, I'm going to pick an in-between number to eat at, you know, all the way through. So it's up to you, Allie. I mean, you have that one extra decision that the rest of us don't have. So.
Use it wisely.
That's quite the flex there. Holy moly.
Okay, you also did just mention that you're thinking about maintenance for yourself, although I've heard you have strong opinions on maintenance and anabolic versus catabolic, so I want to hear about that.
I do. And so, like, one of the things that I'm adamant about is that there technically is no such thing as maintenance. So
what?
There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. Yes. Okay. It's like this elusive
so everyone
thing
trying
that
to maintain in the lockdown, it's impossible.
It is. We're always either building up or tearing down. Like, there is no in between. So you're kind of accepting that. So that in between is that, like, accepting that if I'm not building, I'm probably in the space of becoming catabolic. So I need to do whatever I can to try to keep as much muscle as possible, which is, you know, lifting a certain way, making sure you're, you know, hitting your macros and eating your protein. Because the thing is that protein is like the most expensive resource on your body. Your muscles are your most expensive resource. So your body's always looking for an excuse to get rid of them. Because, you know, when all else fails and we need to get rid of something or there's not enough food, your body would prefer to get rid of muscle because it wants to use, you know, fat or carbs for fuel. It doesn't really want to use muscle. It's not a very efficient fuel. So because that's the most metabolic resource, if something changes, if you're eating too little, if you're not even too little, but that's why during a diet I was saying the protein doesn't change because of the fact that your body is looking for that. Like, what do we need to throw off the ship? Oh, there's all that muscle that nobody cares about that we're not using. So you always have to use it, and you want to continue to give your body enough protein so that your body is not like, oh, where do we get our protein needs from? There it is, the muscle. So a lot of people don't look at it from that perspective, and especially
your body has a great voice.
Yes, that's the voice that I give to my body. It's like, what? Where do we? There it is. Got it.
What's going on, guys?
Hey guys, we need some protein. Yeah, I give that example to my moms a lot because, you know, moms don't realize that with every pregnancy, their protein needs were higher because, you know, you're creating a human being and all. So
oh my God,
their protein needs are higher, and if they're not getting that protein, you know, I always give them the body voice, and your body says, oh, where does baby gonna get the protein from? Mommy's muscles. So that's why a lot of women don't understand the changes that their bodies go through after pregnancies. But with each pregnancy, you probably lost quite a bit of muscle because of the fact that most women aren't like hugely aware of their protein during pregnancy. You're just eating to eat and survive and not get morning sickness or whatever. So when the baby needs protein, it comes from mommy's muscles. So the more babies, you know, the more pregnancies that a woman has gone through, she's typically more in a muscle deficit than someone who maybe has never had children. So that's something to consider because metabolically, that's going to make it harder for her if she's trying to do something like lose weight or something like that. That's why it's a lot harder for the mamas because of the muscle. So yeah, I just want people to be aware of catabolism. Like, I mean, you don't have to be scared of it, but if you're aware, then that's the lifestyle that you take on. It's just a muscle-based mindset of making sure that you're always eating and working out in a way that keeps, you know, like at the very least, or adds to the muscle mass that you have because your body's just always looking for excuses to get rid of it.
Okay, and what is that way? What do you suggest on protein? Because we know MyFitnessPal is a jerk.
MyFitnessPal is a jerk. The requirements that most of your listeners have heard is probably plenty. So I'm sure like most people hear like the gram per pound of body weight or something like that. Like that's typically fine. It doesn't need to be in excess. You don't need to go over like 1.5 grams per pound. You know, usually obviously it's like per kilo, like 0.8 per kilo, but I'm American, so I talk in grams. So per pound of body weight, if you're having that gram, some people will use percentages like 30% or something like that. The only problem with that is that changes as the calories change. So if you're only looking at percentages, 30% of 1,200 is a lot different than 30% of 1,800 or 2,200. So it's really about understanding both. Like, yes, you can aim for 30% if you're somebody who's actually eating enough to sustain whatever the functions of your body that you're trying to sustain. But if you're not, then you're actually dropping your protein every time you drop your calories. If you're only using percentages, which is what we were talking about before, your protein is the one thing that shouldn't drop. So if 30% equals your 1 gram per pound of body weight right now, then that's wonderful. Shoot for 30%. But if you reduce your calories, then it still needs to stay at whatever that level was, 180 or something like that, you know, whatever the percentages are. I tend to go a little bit higher just because, like I say, because I love carbs. So I need the protein to kind of balance that out, to balance my my blood sugar because, yes, it's my habit. Yeah. So yeah, definitely like eating the protein. But that depends on your body types because like an ectomorph can have way more carbs and they can do a little bit lower protein because of the fact that their body is just like burning nonstop anyways. So ectomorph may be able to have like up to 60, 50-60% carb intake, where, an endomorph, for somebody that just naturally gains fat or fat and muscle at the same time, will be like 35, 30 to 35% if you're talking percent wise. But the gram per pound is something that most people should shoot for, or at least the gram per pound of your muscle mass. But the thing is most people don't know their lean body mass.
100%.
So
No!
Max is 100%.
His brain is
muscle.
also muscle.
0 brain.
Love it. So yeah.
Okay,
I would.
but I don't understand, because I can only absorb 30 grams of protein in one sitting. So what do I do? Leading question.
Have more sittings. No, just kidding.
I'm sitting all day, baby.
Yeah, well, and also the amount that you can absorb changes based on what you're eating. So, it's different if you're having like protein shakes and stuff like that in there. And so, there's a lot of people that have all of the worries about protein too. And so I know like that's a huge thing. And I get a lot of it when I do like a protein challenge once or twice a year. And you get all the people that are like, my kidneys are going to explode. And it's like, they're not. You're going to be okay. Like it's the only time that you're having issues with those things is if you're somebody who already had issues. Like if you're somebody who already has kidney problems, then sure, you're going to have problems with a higher protein intake, but you already know that. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about that. If you can only absorb 30 grams, then sure. Like if that is...
No, I don't mean that
you.
I can eat it. I feel like it's a myth, but I actually don't know. I would love to hear your opinion on this. That people say that, like, in one sitting, like, 30 grams is it, and that you should, like, anything more, your body's not going to use, which I don't know if that's true.
Well, it's not necessarily that it's not going to use. I mean, that's with anything that you have in excess. Like, anything that you have in excess is going to be stored. But like we just talked about, like, your body doesn't necessarily like to store protein. So it takes a lot more protein for your body to decide, like, okay, let's convert this into I'm going to do my body voice again. Your body decides, let's convert this into glucose to use for energy. And so that's the main thing that people are trying to avoid. It's like, what happens if I eat this in excess? What is my body going to store it as? Because that's the only reason why you would care whether or not your body can only absorb so much. Because the fact is that if you're eating the calories, you're eating the calories. So if you decide, okay, my body can only absorb 30 grams of protein, so I may as well just eat all the rest in carbs or fat. Remember, carbs and fat are the things that your body actually likes to store. So that means that you're going to be going in excess on those in order to try to not go in excess on your protein, when your body does not really care about storing the protein. It cares about storing the carbs and fat. So which one are you going to give it more of? The thing that it prefers to store, or the thing that it's going to try to get rid of anyway? So that's my perspective on it, because there are the studies that like show that you can only have so much, but it depends on the type of protein, because that's completely different for, like, say, a vegan or vegetarian. They may need to overshoot a little bit in protein because of the fact that they're not complete proteins. So it's really hard to tell someone that they only need to eat a certain amount when maybe their body is actually absorbing even less of it. So like a lot of my vegan clients, where I'll have them in like the 35% range for their protein needs, because of the fact that they're only eating one type of protein, which means that it's not complete. Again, they would have to have a lot of decision fatigue come into play to make sure I'm eating, like, this is complete because I have my beans and then I have my rice, and that, like, it's, you don't need to think about all that. Let's just overshoot it, because it's better to, if you're going to overshoot something, protein is it. Overshooting in the other areas is, like I say, it's a crapshoot, because that is what your body wants to store. So that's the perspective that I take on it, is do it based on your goals. If that's not your goal, if your goal isn't building muscle, maintaining muscle, losing fat, then fill in the blanks however you want. Sure, get in that minimum RDA requirement that we were talking about that MFP has for the sedentary person, because most of the studies are done on sedentary populations. So that's why they're so low. The person that's active and actively breaking down their muscles, like you're doing CrossFit, you're crushing in the gym, you're getting all these PRs, like your body needs that protein so that it doesn't get rid of your protein.
Okay, well, we're all in our houses stressed out, and I would love to hear your take on cortisol's role in weight loss and insulin. And I know that you've also talked about ghrelin, and I want everything about the hormones and the chemicals going on inside me.
Just like, tell me all the things. Yeah, so the way that the hormones typically come into play is the main ones that I look at are testosterone, HGH, leptin, and cortisol. Like, as far as the ones that affect your body. And the way that you eat or exercise tends to affect those. So, like, for women, a lot of my women, what I'm usually trying to explain to them is the reason why men seem to lose fat so much faster is because they have this testosterone, they have all this muscle, their metabolism's faster. That's why it sucks. You go on this diet with your husband, you lose like 5 pounds all year, and he loses like 20 pounds in a month. So it's because, you know, they have this higher testosterone. But women have HGH and typically higher levels of it because it's connected to estrogen, which guys can have. They release some HGH too if they're doing heavy squats and doing the things. But that's the reason why. So women would need to focus more on their HGH. And a lot of times the workouts that they're doing are suppressing their HGH. And if that's like your muscle gain, fat loss, like superhero is your HGH. So when women are only doing like circuit style workouts or cardio workouts and things like that, it's suppressing their HGH. So then the only time their body even has a chance to release it is maybe at night. But if they're doing more of the heavy lifting, like especially stuff like heavy squats, things like that help to release HGH in both men and women. So doing workouts that increase your HGH release are always going to be the things that you're going to want to do the most. Same thing when it comes to like your leptin levels. People that are having super low calorie diets on top of suppressing their HGH, or a lot of times they're dealing with being hungrier. So that's where we talk about it, like with that decision fatigue and stuff like that. They're doing these diets that suppress their HGH, which would actually help them to regulate their hormone levels. So then their leptin levels start dropping, and then they're hungrier, which is just, you're just sabotaging yourself. Like you're hungry and then you're eating, but you're trying to diet, so you reduce your calories more, and then you're hungry and then you're eating, and it keeps you in this like crazy, nasty spiral. So for most women, that does come down to the cortisol. And not just talking about the women, Max, I know that guys too. The thing
stressed out.
But women just get stressed. They get stressed like a lot easier than guys do. So, you know, they just, whatever. We take ourselves too seriously. We are caring for other people and things like that. So the main reason is that if we know that we have that HGH in our estrogen production, then we're going to behave in a way that nurtures it, which means not doing stuff that's keeping our cortisol through the roof. But the thing is about cortisol, a lot of times we just hear the bad part about it. Cortisol can be good or bad. Stress can be good or bad. Workout is a stressor. Workout like increases your cortisol levels. So you want the good side of the cortisol. The thing is there's acute and there's chronic. So it's the acute stress that we want. That's the good stuff. That's the HIIT workouts. That's the, you know, like you get that spike and then you come down. If you can train your body to come back down, that's the good cortisol release. When you just stay elevated all the time, that's the cortisol that you're going to struggle with, because that's the chronic stress. That's when your cortisol levels are through the roof. And when your cortisol levels are through the roof, then your body starts to retain more water. And then when your body starts to retain more water, you're stepping on the scale, which makes you stress more. And then the saga continues. So it's really about understanding like what triggers it, because once you start that, for most women, it's when that water retention kicks in. Like they can't get off of the stress roller coaster. So they're dealing with all the stuff. that's happening at home, like a lot of us are now. And we're getting on the scale and it keeps going up and we're worried, am I not moving enough? And do I need to drop my calories? Do I need to find a different type of way to exercise? Why is the scale going up? I knew I shouldn't have ate as many carbs. Whatever it is, you're stressing.
The scale has always been just like the biggest just mistake I find that people is, like, the scale doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your poundage doesn't, your gravity weight doesn't matter. It's like what you look like, what your body's composed of. Like that's always something I tell people when, like, but I feel like that's a big stress on a lot of people. So what do you tell them? How do you tell them to get on, not worry about their weight, I guess? Or, yeah.
Yeah, that is the question, right? Like, how do you tell somebody?
It. Like,
you should get a DEXA scan every morning. Just one of those pool dips. So you know that your body fat is going down and your weight's going up.
That's why I've had so many, like, of the clinics that do DEXA scans and metabolic type clinics reach out to me because they wish that more people would get scanned, because then they would understand, like, what's actually happening beneath the surface. When we don't know what's happening beneath, like, to try to judge everything based on the scale, like, how freaking finicky is the scale? Like, it's going to go up or down based on whether or not you had Chinese food last night. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So much so.
To not know. So when you don't know what's happening or why, then you're freaking out. And if you're freaking out, then it's happening again. And so, like, I've seen women, like, stress gain up to, like, 20 to 30 pounds. And it all started from, like, that first, like, 1 or 2 pounds when they were like, I don't know why the scale's not moving. And it's just like, okay, let's remain calm. You had some sushi. It's okay. But we want to, like, say, I know I'm a little stressed, but. And with my clients, I usually try to stop the but. Like, as soon as you say, like, I know I'm stressed, but, that means you're about to excuse one of the things that's probably causing the most troubles for you, is by saying, but I should still, be seeing progress. But I'm just going to go for a run or something like that. And we don't realize that a lot of times the things that we do that we think are solving stress are adding to it. So like I said, if you're stressed out and then you go for a run, a 60-minute run is keeping your stress levels up for another 60 minutes. That's not training them to come down. If you're stressed out, you need to do something that's actually going to bring your stress levels down. So that's when you need to do the stuff that feels less productive, like walking or yoga or something like that. So that's actually the good part about what's happening now is, like, I live by the beach and I just see people walking all the time now, like way more now than even in spring, like a usual spring where people are at the beach. So that's a good thing that people are out and walking more when they're super stressed out. But when it turns into higher endurance, like maybe power walking, running more, things like that, that's when it's going to start having those diminishing returns, because that's increasing the stress level. Like, if you go out for a run because you just watched the news for 2 hours, like, now you're just packing on the stress. So even though it's going to feel like, because maybe the endorphins give you that, like, short term, okay, I got that high, I just, like, I'm feeling good, I got it all off my shoulders. You didn't. You actually just added way more to your plate, because then you come back home, and like I said, then you're, like, homeschooling your kids and doing, like, you're back into the swing of it. So if you're going to go outside, you'd be better off doing, like, a slow-paced leisure walk than you would be going for a run.
Dang. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's news for me. It makes sense.
Yeah. It is. It's tough. It's hard.
Well, and I also wonder, because basically you're saying, like, what you're doing might actually be harming you. I wonder about overtraining. This is maybe not the best time to be talking about, like, resting or how hard do I go versus how much time do I take off, because a lot of people can't go hard. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, what are your recommendations on days off and how to recover from something? Maybe you do 300 push-ups in a day. Yeah. It's
definitely, it's a different world now. So, like, when gyms first started closing, like, I sent out, like, a global email to people, like, staff that I worked with at different gyms, like the trainers that I know that do go hard and everything, just kind of letting them know, like, you can relax for the first couple of weeks, like we were talking about before, because a lot of the people that were grinding it out, they did need the rest. Whereas the people who weren't or who are already struggling to try to find time to work out, like maybe this is a good time for them to start that habit.
I thought the grind didn't stop. Does the grind stop? I thought the grind never stops.
Team no days off, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm not team no days off. I believe in deloads. I believe in rest days. So sometimes that rest is a deload where you're just doing higher reps of something that you were doing, super low reps of. Sometimes it's complete time off. Usually like every 3 to 6 weeks, I'm trying to do something, either deload or take a full like rest day, week, whatever. I usually take 1 or 2. So for somebody who is doing the 500 push-ups a day, which if you're doing 500 push-ups a day, like please find me because I need to like see this. I need to see who's doing 500 push-ups a day. Like you are amazing and I need to like follow you. That's a lot of push-ups. But
it's the same breakfast of workouts.
Exactly. So, Allie's going to show us all how to do 500 push-ups a day. She's going to put out a new challenge to get us all doing 500 push-ups.
It's called making a looping video.
But yeah, like you need time for your tendons, ligaments, joints to catch up. And that's the thing, is they're always behind the muscles. So that's usually my biggest recommendation for people, is that even when your muscles feel like they're fully healed, that doesn't mean that your joints and tendons and ligaments have, because they lag behind. So your muscles only take, a short amount of time, especially like, say, like if you're injured. It may only take a couple of weeks to fix something that was muscle related, but it could take a couple of months to fix something that was like bones, tendons, or ligament related, because they just heal at completely different paces, bone being the thing that takes the longest to heal. So having that built-in recovery, whether it's if you're going hard every single day, then maybe you just need to take a day every week. If you're going hard, 4 to 6 days a week for a few weeks, then maybe you want to look at actually taking like a full like week or 2 like completely off. But other than that, I would just do every like 4 weeks. So a lot of my more advanced clients, I have them on a 3-week on, 1-week deload is the way that we typically periodize it, because the more advanced you get, the more often you have to deload. In the beginning, you may not need to. So like my beginner clients, they may go for 8, 12 weeks before they have any like intense like full rest week. But my advanced clients, they have a deload every 3 weeks. So they do 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And then every like 12th week is when we'll actually have a rest week. So the deload, they're still working. It's like an active recovery.
Sure.
They're not doing the exact same thing. So if they were doing squats and heavy deads, then either they're doing those super light or they're doing something maybe more circuit-like or something like that. So they're still moving, but around that 12-week mark is that when we'll actually have like a full like deload, like rest.
You don't leave your bed for a full week, or what do we do there?
Yeah, you do nothing. You just Netflix. No, just kidding. I usually tell them like, go be productive, because it's hard. Like the people that do like that grind it out, like us, that like we actually like working out and we feel like something's wrong when we can't like get to the iron the way that we want to. It's hard to have that. So usually I'm like giving them some kind of assignment, like go organize your closet, go do something like that, like do something that so that you're still like active. Do the thing that you've always saying you don't have time to do, like go do that just during this week. And that way you have like this deadline to go and get it done and organize all the cabinets in your house or whatever, which I feel like that's what people are doing now anyways, because what else is there to do? They're just finding things like, what's under the couch? Let me clean under here. Let me rearrange the house. So yeah, I feel like a lot of us had that deload the past couple of weeks, and it kind of feels like it's time to get back to it now. It's time to move into that plan B, whatever it was for you. You know what I mean? When you thought it was only a couple of weeks, that was one thing, but I think it's plan B time for a lot of
Plan
people.
B is your app, obviously.
Obviously.
Wait, give us the web address again. Where can we go get your app?
Eat More to Weigh Less. That's the number 2. eatmore2wayless.com/vault.
Awesome. And actually, where can we find you on social? We picked your brain for a long time. I know you got to head out, so let us know.
I'm in the middle of moving, so it's crazy. I mean, it's actually fun because I just get to like watch my husband and kids do all the work from this window while I sit here and talk to you guys. So I'm grateful for the excuse.
Moving is just working out with couches instead of barbells.
It is. I'm grateful for being able to do something, to be able to like move. I'm like, I'll do this heavy lifting. Give me the furniture. You know, this is the time that you want to move all your own stuff. So yeah, I'm eat more, number 2, way less, or EM2WL, pretty much everywhere. So
on all the things, Instagram, Facebook.
All the things, Facebook, okay. Pinterest, Google Plus. I don't know. Is that still a thing? I know we had it.
R.I.P.
Mine.
All the things. Yeah. Eat more to weigh less, or EM2WL.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been awesome. Definitely eye-opening on a lot of things for me, and I imagine our audience thinks so too. And yeah, thank you to all the FitHeads out there. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next time. Thank you guys. All right, sweet.